Welcome to Financial Investing Radio, where you'll learn the secrets for consistent, high-probability returns in the financial markets for additional income to change your life. Grant applies consistent, high-probability trading systems for the financial markets. He's only recently started sharing these tried and true market secrets. As a gift to listeners, Grant is offering his roadmap to high-probability financial control. Go to financialinvestingradio.com and download yours today. Now, here's your host and trading veteran, Grant Larson.
Hey everybody, this is Grant. Thanks for joining. When I first started investing, well, actually still now, but especially primarily when I first started doing trading and investing, the first and foremost thing on my mind was, how do I protect my capital? How do I keep from losing it? And that, of course, is on the mind of most folks, unless you got money to burn. That wouldn't be me. One night while I was hiking back to my camp in Colorado, there was a small moon out, but there wasn't too much light. And I had my backpack and my compass. I was with a party of people, but we separated at one point to go check out different areas. And I ended up spending a lot of hours over in another part of the mountain checking something out. And I had plenty of batteries for my light. I also had a GPS, and I had dropped a pin on our camp, so I felt fairly confident that I could get back. But I was alone, and it got dark, and I had probably 3 miles to go in order to get back to the camp, going through some canyons and whatnot. As I proceeded through the dark, I could see the outline of a mountain ridge, and what was interesting is the way the land was contoured. It told my eyes and my brain that I wanted to go to the left in order to get back down off the mountain towards my camp. But my GPS system was saying I needed to go to the right. So even though everything that I could discern in the dark would lead me further back into the mountain. In other words, my brain's saying go left. It looks like it goes down going to the left, but my GPS is saying go to the right. So after a while, after thinking it through, I finally determined to follow my GPS, and thankfully I did that. Early in my trading investing, I focused so much on how much money I'm going to make. And of course, we all want to know that, but what I've learned over the years is there's a fundamental issue. There's a problem with thinking this way. And the issue is that we will often see what we want to see, and we'll ignore other elements or factors that don't support what we want to see. So when we fixate on how much am I going to make out of this, that actually sets us up to fail. The safer approach is to think about and look for what are the areas that will provide me the best protection by making this investment or this trading decision. So by changing my line of thinking to preservation of capital and making sure I understand what protections are in place to support a specific direction, then I increase my probabilities. So that's critical to make that shift in thinking. And so we want to get out of the frame of mind, of course, that says, hey, I'm going to make all this money. That is a fool's errand and will obviously create a lot of problems for us. So what does this mean, right? What does it mean when we're making an investment decision or trading decision? We need to identify our lines of defense. And for example, let's say we are looking to invest in Apple. So the stock ticker is AAPL, and we wanted to buy it or go long. So there are several. I'm going to list 8 here. These are not the only items to look at. I'm going to list 8 items, 8 questions to ask when making this kind of decision. Number 1, what key moving averages are below me on the daily chart? All right, pretty straightforward. So that's the first question. So in my previous podcast, I introduced the notion of multiple time frames. And I talked about developing algorithms to test and evaluate certain time frames. Right now, for our purposes, let me just talk about some 8 things to look at if I was going to go long on any stock. I picked Apple here. It doesn't matter. All right, so what are the key moving averages? Now we could talk a bit about what are the right moving averages to use. That's for another conversation. What's important is that I'm going to talk about multiple time frames and things to consider on each time frame. So what key moving averages are below me on the daily chart? That's number 1. Number 2, what support is there on the weekly and the monthly chart? All right, so what kind of lines might we have? What kind of channel lines? What kind of moving averages? What does it look like on those larger time frames? Again, this is for a swing, trade, or investment period of time. All right, so that's number 2. What kind of moving averages or support is below me on the weekly and the monthly chart? Number 3, how is the index performing in which Apple resides? For example, one key index that Apple resides in is NDX. And so the question is how is Apple behaving within that index? Is it showing some relative strength within that index? All right, so that's the third question. Fourth question, what do the relevant momentum indicators tell me? All right, so let's assume that I've got where current price is. I've got sufficient both moving average as well as channel or other support lines below me on multiple levels, right? Meaning daily, weekly, monthly. Now we ask the question about momentum. What sort of push is there at the moment in terms of market interest? All right, where are we? Number 5. All right, number 5. What's the current volatility in the market? So I look at the VIX, right? VIX. So take a look at the VIX and understand what the current volatility is, what level of volatility is taking place. That has several aspects of impacting how easy it is to get in, what kind of option strategy to use. We won't go through all that, but in any event, what's the current volatility? Number 6, when is Apple's next earnings report? Obviously, you want to be aware of that so you don't make an investment or trading decision and you're going to run into a report that's going to shift things or bounce things around. Number 7, what are the key moving averages on Apple's correlated markets? What's a correlated market to Apple? Think about that. What would be some other markets, whether directly or inversely related to Apple? And then where are the moving averages on those? All right. So we won't go through what all those are, but what are the key moving averages on Apple's correlated markets? And then number 8, how long has Apple been in the current move? Right, we certainly want to understand what that is as well. Okay, so those are 8 questions. Now, these kinds of questions, they're not focused on what is the anticipated distance for the move, or rather, how much money can I make? Now, it's helpful to know what the average true range is and how typical a move is. That's certainly helpful to know. But first and foremost, know the context and know what your protections and lines of defense are. Each one, answering each of those questions, the 8 questions there, builds this case that says, yeah, this is a pretty decent time to do this. So rather than focus on creating a basis, or I should say rather, these questions, I should point out, they're focused on creating a basis for a protective barrier, right, to protect our capital and our investment, which is really what we want to do. Okay, so it turns out as I walked into the camp late into the night, I had not allocated sufficient time to get back earlier. So the issue was I was enjoying the views from a pristine location. I was actually tracking some elk. I was found some elk tracks and sat quietly and waited for them to come hang around me at eating time towards the end of the day. So I just sat there and watched them. They eventually became aware of my presence. They got about 20 yards from me though. But I sort of had to pay the price and hike back in the dark. So I had not prepared enough time to return in the light. I was lucky enough to get back without any serious issues, but I was, of course, glad to have that GPS. So in order to build a sustainable investment strategy, we should establish a simple checklist of items to review, right, to protect our hard-earned capital, such as those 8 that I mentioned. It's worth it to take the time to do that. Now, after doing all the homework, it seems that sometimes the market turns around and pushes in the opposite direction. So sometimes I ask myself, is the market manipulated? Well, we'll talk about that in another podcast. But in any event, I want you to look at this and see an example. So in terms of the 8 things, those 8 things plus others are the kinds of considerations that I've developed into my own algorithms, right? So my own code and scripts check and evaluate a large number of items to help establish context. I'd much rather have the safer, higher probability opportunity. So I'll show you an example of it. If you go to financialinvestingradio.com, I've uploaded a stock report that I generated yesterday. I produce these every few days. It's generated for January 5th, 2018. Look for episode 31 on that page on Financial Investing Radio and download that report. It's free. Just download it. Take a look. I'm making it free for you today, of course. Now compare the signals on that report with the current market action going on at this time. This report's for Dow Jones stocks, but take a look at those. The algorithms, again, that I use, that I developed, generate signals that take into consideration the kinds of items. I haven't listed all the items, but the kinds of items that I listed earlier in this podcast. So let me know what you think. Until next time, get a GPS, right, for your investing decision that you can trust. Thanks for joining me. Bye.
Thank you for joining Grant on Financial Investing Radio. Remember to subscribe and leave feedback. Don't forget to download your free roadmap to high probability financial control before you make an investment decision. Visit financialinvestingradio.com now.